coming back to this trial about oscillating crude protein, and then something that, I found it very interesting is that how cows manage to switch where they are excreting nitrogen. It's kind of, I found it interesting where they kind of move from urine to feces. Were you guys expecting that, or?
So whenever I got the results and started to look into it more, there is some studies that have shown that you increase crude protein digestibility, but they didn't find a subsequent increase in urine nitrogen. And so our thoughts is we switched the route that the urea was being recycled from the large intestine to basically going more towards the rumen. But in our study versus the other studies, why we saw an increase in nitrogen than in the urine, because that greater amount of urea that was being recycled to the rumen was not well utilized to make microbial crude protein. And so that might be the partial reason why we switched nitrogen excretion from feces to the urine.
And one other, Alex found a pretty significant increase in nitrogen digestibility, which is a good thing if that animal then uses that nitrogen to make milk protein. And they didn't in this case. They digested it, but then they oxidized it and excreted the nitrogen. So that would suggest that energy, milk protein responds quite well to increased energy. So this would kind of suggest maybe energy was involved here too. And we didn't, we need to work on getting the energy. If we're going to increase the digestibility of the nitrogen, we got to make sure the energy is there to use that nitrogen to make milk protein. So one thing, if we continue this line, is how can we then increase energy supply along with this oscillation? And that's this drop in intake. That's the problem, is we lost energy intake as well, and that they need energy to make milk protein.
Right about that, about, hey, we need to explore this a little bit more. And I agree. And even if we do, like high starch, low starch, or you are manipulating, you kind of get confounding on some things. So when you are manipulating your crude protein, you are changing some energy sources as well. And that's kind of what you can do, right? This paper here and this research kind of touch a little bit about, I think, where beef cattle and feedlot, they do a concept sometimes that not only feed for a sleek bunk, but they play around about restriction as well and trying to get that compensatory gain throughout the system. And for some reason, we don't do that in dairy, heifers or any stage of, so it's kind of, you are playing with crude protein, but the same thing you could play with, instead of feeding ad libitum, you restrict those cows for a certain amount. Let's say you feed 95% what they need, but then you're going to cut everything, not just crude protein, right? And then the next day you give 100%, and then the other day you feed 95. Do you guys have experience with that? Not only crude protein, but the whole diet. I'm just going to oscillate that.
One experiment we did kind of is like you said, not exactly, but where we basically added a lot of water to the diet, so we changed things. Cows did better. And again, that's why we're finding these inconsistent diets actually do equal or a little bit better. We think that had a lot to do. We didn't measure, well, yes, we did. I forgot we did measure digestibility there. On an energy basis, these again were mid-lactation cows. So on an energy basis, those cows would have been more efficient, where we went from extra energy to less energy with carbohydrates, not fat. So I think there's some potential here, but a big difference between a lactating cow and a growing cow is, if you lose milk production today, you don't gain it back tomorrow. Whereas with growth, if they grow a little slower today, they can grow faster tomorrow. And lactation doesn't work that way. So we have to be careful on stunting them too much on production, because again, it's a different physiological thing than growth. So